So I thought to start off tonight and just talk about the purpose of a spiritual practice. And we get to decide that for ourselves. There's no right or wrong answer here. But there's three possibilities, three very broad possibilities, regardless of what your tradition or interest is. One is just to get a little peace of mind. Have just be able to deal with life, have things sort of settle down, gain some quiet. And you often hear about, we ask people often at the beginning of a retreat why they decided to spend a weekend doing not much. And a lot of times people say, well, I'm just trying to find a little peace and quiet. So that's totally valid reason. It feels good. It's good for the body, physiologically, right? So it's a totally valid reason for undertaking a spiritual practice. The second sort of broad category would be to undertake a spiritual practice. What we're looking for, what our goal is to achieve some sort of altered state, right? Basically to get high, to get ecstatic, change my state, feel better, just feel really, really, really good. And that's possible too. Some people can get quite good at doing that. It's not a permanent state, right? Any particularly high state is often followed by that sense of coming down from that state, and then often yearning for the next one. So a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, I had this amazing spiritual experience, in 1997, and I've been looking for a repeat performance, hopefully better. And but that's the sense of it, is like trying to get to some state that just feels ecstatic, extraordinary. And those kind of states are possible, and they can be quite addictive. So this is different states of Satori or Kundalini and those kind of experiences. Wonderful, feels amazing, and can be quite transformative and instructive, etc. So that's another sort of broad category that is, if that's what you choose, wonderful. So there's a third category that's often not as popular, and that is to find out the truth of our own being, what's actually living this life. So that's a different journey. That's a much more, we don't know where that journey may take us, because it's sort of like, to even begin down that road to find out what this life is truly about. We take the shackles off, and almost invite life to teach us in whatever way it teaches us what we already are. And the challenging part of that particular path is that to find out what we really are, it's much more a path of subtraction than addition. It's not about taking on a certain level of beliefs. It's about sort of really examining all the things that we believe are true that may not be, and to really look at that. And sometimes that is painful, because sometimes we really like our beliefs. When we begin looking at things where our fondest beliefs get challenged, it can be, it's not easy, right? So this third path is what we'll be talking about. If anybody had any questions about where we're going tonight, that's the direction we're going. But the good news is that what we seek down that road isn't far away. It's actually what we already are. And that's precisely what it makes it so difficult to see. Because we've always been taught that what we sense is lacking here can be found somehow out there. And so that's where we're used to looking. We look for in the next adventure, the next experience, the next sensory high, the next success, the next, always the next something that will occur that will sort of make me feel complete, satisfied, like, finally, life feels good. That sense, right? I feel good about the world. I feel comfortable in my own skin. Finally, I can finally just relax. That sense. What makes it difficult is when we're looking for fulfillment in something outside of ourselves. Like I say, the relationship or the promotion or the new house or, the wealth, the fame, the whatever, the respect. There's a lot of possible things that we've been either told growing up or we've been told by commercials that will lead to happiness. New car, you'll be happy. I guarantee it, right? And the thing is that you will, not forever, of course, but for a few days you'll feel really good, to have that new car or the new relationship or the new house, and maybe a few days, months, years, who knows? But there won't ever be the sense of, yes, finally. What I had hoped to realize in this life, I have realized. End of story. Right. But there is one thing that ultimately satisfies. Only one thing. And we come to be willing to look at that often only when all these other paths have proved unfruitful. We go down that path and it's like, yeah, learned a lot. It was good. And not quite it, so I'll back up and try another path. And we keep doing that until, often until we just can't be convinced to do it again. That sense of, it could be a new philosophy, it could be a new religion, it could be a new idea, it could be a new guru. I mean, there's lots of possibilities that seem like, oh yeah, this is it. I know it, I'm sure of it, and I'll run down that road. And where we eventually end up, hopefully, not necessarily a fun place, but where we end up, hopefully, is that all of those will fail. Right? They may be okay. They may feel good for a long time. They may feel great for a long time. But at some point, you realize there may be a sense of, is that all there is to life? Is this really as good as it's ever going to get? Right? Anybody ever had that sense? So if we get to that point, it's like I say, it may not be a fun place, but it's a real place. It's like, yeah, okay, now we're talking about something that's not just theoretical. This is my life, and this is where it's gotten me. I've tried hard to find happiness, right, peace, and this is where it's gotten me. But it sounds disastrous, but it actually is what it usually takes to cause people to stop long enough to see what's already present. See what's already present. And this isn't new philosophy. I mean, Socrates said 2,500 years ago, look within. I mean, this is what they're talking about. The peace is within. So people hear that and think, okay, within, all right, I'll start looking within. And what most people do is look at the psychology that's being played out in their mind. You know, all the ideas and regrets and hopes and dreams and fears and all of that. Right? I'm looking within, I'm really doing it. But in a very real sense, we're still looking outward, right? I mean, it's our thoughts, that's true, but we're still looking at it, right? We're still able to notice the thoughts, right? So we can notice the thought, or we can notice the wall over there. You know, in both cases, there's something more closer, let's say closer to home than the wall or even the thought, right? There's something that notices that. So that's what I'm pointing to when I say look within. Notice that which is already present, has always been present, that's noticed everything that's ever happened in your whole life. It was present for this, just this capacity to know, to be aware. So sometimes in spirituality, this is referred to as pure consciousness. Right? It sounds like a moral thing. It's not. It just means pure prior to whatever content. Bless you. I love to sneeze. Feels good. Prior to content, right? So it's that which notices whatever content may be there, conscious of whatever thought or feeling or sound or taste or touch or sight. Those are all the abilities of this organism to sense into the world around itself. But and the body's required to notice that. No body, you can't hear anything, that's obvious. But the body itself doesn't hear. The ear actually doesn't hear anything itself, right? It receives information and it passes it along, but it doesn't itself hear anything, right? Same as the eye doesn't actually see anything. It receives light and turns it into electrochemical signal and passes that on to the brain, but the eyeball itself doesn't see anything. So that's all sort of reconstituted in the brain, and we can form an image or a sound, right, or a taste. That we need this organism to do. But is it the brain cells that actually taste or hear? They're necessary, but are they the final, ultimate experiencers of this reality? Or is it this consciousness, right? That's sort of the fundamental question of spirituality. What we've been taught in biology class and what most scientists still believe is that, there's this massive brain cells up there and don't know how they do it, but they're conscious. So it's like consciousness arises from, you get a certain number, a single brain cell, they say, well, that's probably not conscious, but you clump them all together and then that creates consciousness. I mean, that's almost literally the extent of the explanation. But the there is a completely different alternative, and that is that consciousness exists, and what is aware, even that we have this body, even that the body's present, is this consciousness, right? This awareness. So I'm aware. I look at down here. I can touch it. I can look at it. I can see it. I can, sense into the thoughts of the head. But there's something more fundamental and ever-present already. Just this capacity, this spaciousness, this aware immensity. So the first, you could say the first glimpse of enlightenment is recognizing that awareness is both ever-present and primary, never absent, and necessary, right? No awareness, the ears might still hear that sound, but there'd be nobody home to notice it, right? The ears would still vibrate, the signal would still be sent to the brain cells, but there'd be nobody home to know that was happening. So there's also, there may be the understanding initially that this awareness feels local. And there can be that sense of it because it does operate through these bodies, right? So because we're looking out of these eyes, it feels like the awareness must be here that's aware of something out there. But when we look more deeply, we can't find the edge to that awareness. We can't claim that, the awareness is sort of right here in my head, and that's where it emanates from, and that's where it's limited to. But this is just a thought, this is just a concept, right? We can't, if we try to sense into it in just forget all about what we were taught, but just sense into it ourselves and say, okay, where's this awareness limited to? I mean, can we find an edge to it? I mean, is it just my skin, or is it this far away, or over there somewhere, or are we all living in our separate little awareness bubbles and bumping into each other from time to time? Is this awareness end here, and Bill's awareness, comes over there, and sort of touch awareness is somewhere in the middle? Is that how it works? But if it doesn't, when we really sense into what it is, it doesn't in itself have any attributes. It's not tall or short, not actually old or young, not even male or female. It's just aware, right? So any ideas about what we are, that I am this person, I have this name, I have this skill, I'm not so good at that, I'm good at this, I look like this, and not like my brother, and all those kind of things are happening in the mind, but awareness is just present, watching us recite all of these things that we've told ourselves 100 times, and come to believe that that's who I am. I've been told, I was given my name when I was 0 years old, and that's who I am. So we can really question that, like, is this awareness personal? Does it feel personal? Or is it just aware? If we try to claim that, yeah, I think it's personal, I think it's my awareness, then we can ask, well, how is that different than someone else's awareness? You know, if it doesn't have any attributes, and we can't find the edge to it, it's not limited in space that way, how is it different than someone else's awareness? Or a rabbit's awareness? You know, the other possibility is that there's one awareness, the awareness, this alive capacity to be present for whatever's happening. There's only one awareness, and it's required, that one awareness is required to know anything. Then we're really talking about what many traditions have pointed to and named as being really the doorway to a sense of union with life, union with the divine, by whatever name you like. You know, and rather than perceiving it as something far away that I have to believe in, or I have to attain, or I have to become worthy of, or I have to earn merit to be considered, when we recognize that what we already unavoidably are is this awareness. And that is not only the doorway, that is the deepest reality of what's living this life. And the good news is that it's already fully present. Sure, I mean, there may be, you know, a few beliefs that we have to sort of see through. It's sort of like, you know, the sun's always shining. We know that. But sometimes it's a cloudy day and we can't see the sun. But we never sort of doubt the sun is there, right? And then one day the clouds, you know, get blown away and there it is, sun. Always was there. You know, it was just obscured, temporarily obscured. And that obscuring happened in this lifetime. You weren't born with it. You weren't born with it. When you were born, you were fully present, fully alive, and you didn't know a single word, not one word. So there was no thought that was happening in your head. In order to think, you have to know the words. I mean, thinking is words that we somehow repeat to ourselves in our head. So that first year or whatever of our life for all of us was lived in actually a state of grace. You know, we may have been hungry, we may have been upset, we may have had a bellyache, whatever. You know, we could express that clearly. But we weren't converting it into concepts. We weren't converting it into any complaints about mom or dad. You know, we weren't, you know, any judgments about anybody, any hopes. I mean, it was just a moment-to-moment experiential existence. So I'm not suggesting we go back to infancy. That's not necessary. But that same total transparency to the reality of of this life is something that we all experienced at one time in our life. And I believe for many people there's that sense of hope, I think, that that's possible. Possible from having now known how life works, the basic functions, how to get around in the world, how to earn a living, etc. So we don't lose that capacity, but we can realize that it's not the totality of what we are. It's just how we've learned to function through these organisms. But what's actually living this life is the same as it's always been, just this alive, unconditioned presence. And then, sure, the body's present, the body's conditioned. All bodies are. Mostly in a good way, sometimes in some ways that aren't that helpful, but, that's the way it is. So we can see that. We can see, this, growing up, I got this dose of conditioning. Maybe I was tended towards being, angry or judgmental or feeling unworthy or being depressed or something. Okay. That may be true. May be true on a relative level, but what's more true, more fundamentally true, is that what we fundamentally are is this spacious capacity to be present for everything that unfolds in our life, good, bad, and indifferent, which is different than just seeking higher states. And if we recognize that this sense of what we fundamentally are, we can truly relax about what happens. We still have to function, we still get to make decisions, still get to live our life, but it's possible to do that without anxiety and fear. Right? Because there's a sense of what is our ultimate identity is something that is not subject to all the ups and downs that these bodies are. Injury, illness, death. So the way to discover that is just, one of the ways is what we did right at the beginning, is just use our sensory capacities of the body to just slow down enough to be able to give the body something to do. Like, I'll pay attention in this sense and then that sense, and if I sort of open my aperture enough to notice all of these sensory inputs at once, we can see that's our environment in this moment, and there's something that's aware of it. That's one doorway, right? Another doorway is just to sort of use the mind to see all the ways that identify all the ways that we've identified ourselves that may be relatively true but not ultimately true. To see that, this body's been conditioned to be a cook, great, wonderful. Be a dentist, wonderful. But it's just what happened to this particular body. It doesn't define what I am any more than our past does. It's again just what happened. It's not in this moment. It doesn't define us. As we're just sitting here, there's just this sense of being present, right? But what the human mind does is say, no, it couldn't be like that easy. Right? I've got to do something. I've got to earn it. Right? That's what we were taught. What about all my flaws? What about those? We can come up with all kinds of arguments about why it's not okay. Very convincing arguments. Our parents used them on us, right? Maybe our boss did. Maybe our spouse did. Who knows? But we can see, okay, the mind can come up with endless reasons why somehow we're not entitled. We're not entitled to step into our own right to live this life. The mind will come up with endless arguments. If we try to get there through, sort of perfecting this organism, there will be no end to it. Whatever you do will never be enough. It's not bad. It's just not effective. If we think that's the path, the thing is, that's sort of the path for most other things in life. You're not very good at what you're doing. Great, just do it better. Learn more, try harder. But in spirituality, those same directives deny what's already present. Right? And we start off in that direction. Every step that we make in that direction will take us further away. It must, because what is true is already present, already complete, period. Already done. Alive, dynamic, but complete. Doesn't need improvement. Sometimes you'll hear people say, well, I'm trying to become more aware. The awareness isn't the problem. The awareness is fine. Everybody's aware right now, right? Yes? Everybody can hear these words. They may not make any sense, but you can hear them, right? So there's awareness. That's the awareness I'm talking about, not some distant, special awareness. Right? So that awareness is complete in everyone. But it gets, in terms of how we act or behave or what we say, it gets filtered through this conditioning. That's where it can get muddled. That's where, somebody's behavior that looks, dysfunctional. That's what's happening. It's the purity of awareness, flowing through a thoroughly conditioned form, looks like that, through no fault of their own. Through no fault of their own, no blame. For the same reason that there's no blame in our own life for having taken on conditioning unconsciously as we did. We never, we never decided as a 10-year-old that, we were going to grow up to feel unworthy, for example. I know what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be unworthy. We didn't do that. We took it on unconsciously, and then it's, as an adult, it's like, well, wait a minute. Why is this persistent feeling there? And it can feel hardwired. It can feel like, I guess that's just how it is. I guess I just have to live out my life and, tolerate it. But if we spend all our life energy fighting with the conditioning, the presumption it causes us to go astray is that we think the conditioning is what I am. So if we're fighting with it, it feels like we're fighting against ourselves. This is what I am, and I don't like it. How is that going to result in a good outcome? Being against what we feel like we are. But if we can just step back from that and recognize that, okay, the body got conditioned, okay, that's how it is. But, there's this sense of being aware of that conditioning and watching it and seeing how it works. And not running away from it, not suppressing it, not necessarily acting out every, silly thought that comes through our head, but seeing it, being willing to see all those silly thoughts, see them like, okay, there's that pattern arising again. And the more familiar we are with it, the more we can see it clearly, the less control that it has over how we function. So that's the power of this awareness. It's not an inert thing. It's actually has a transformative power, but not by opposing something that we're trying to change, but just the willingness to see it, because it's willing to see it because it itself is not subject to harm, right? It's not, the awareness itself, there's, once we get the hang of it, we can see that it itself is not conditioned. So it's easier to see the conditioning that this body-mind has picked up and see the randomness of it. And when we can see that and see it's not, it's close, but it's not the essence of what we are, then there's much more of a relaxation about it. And that's when things can actually soften. Not overnight, but they will soften.